There's a single word that can tell you more about international diplomacy than a 100-page treaty. A word that, when changed in an official statement, can silently shift the tectonic plates of geopolitics. And right now, that word is at the center of a controversy brewing around the British royal family. It involves a devastating natural disaster, two of the most photographed people on the planet, and a geographical description that has sparked a serious debate about neutrality, influence, and what happens when a charitable message gets caught in a political crossfire. It's a story that seems simple on the surface, a message of condolence, but when you look one layer deeper, you find questions that nobody in the official channel seems eager to answer. Questions about who signed off on the language, why a specific phrase was chosen over another, and what it reveals about the invisible pressures facing a modern monarchy. The story begins, as so many recent stories do, with Prince William and Princess Kate. For months, the public narrative surrounding the Princess of Wales has been focused on her health and her gradual, carefully managed return to public duties. Every appearance, every photograph, every statement from their office at Kensington Palace is scrutinized with a level of intensity that is hard to overstate. They exist in a bubble where a misplaced gesture or an ambiguous sentence can become a global headline within minutes. Their communications team is considered one of the most polished and strategic in the world, operating with a precision that usually leaves no room for error. But as we've seen time and time again, even the most sophisticated operations are run by humans, and humans make mistakes. Or, and this is the more intriguing possibility, they don't make mistakes at all. They make calculated decisions that are later interpreted as errors. This particular situation unfolded against the backdrop of a genuine tragedy. A catastrophic flash flood in Nepal had resulted in immense loss of life and widespread destruction. These weren't just numbers on a screen. These were communities washed away, families torn apart, and a nation facing a monumental recovery effort. In moments like this, the world looks to its leaders, its institutions, and its cultural icons to offer support. The royal family, with their global platform and history of charitable outreach, plays a specific role in this ecosystem of international empathy. When they speak, it's meant to convey a sense of shared humanity, a message that transcends borders and politics. It is, in theory, the simplest job in the world: express sympathy. And so, a statement was issued from Kensington Palace. It was signed by William and Kate, a joint message of condolence that was, by all accounts, heartfelt and somber. It spoke of the devastation and offered strength to those affected. For the first few hours, it was exactly what one would expect: a standard, albeit tragic, piece of royal correspondence. But then, the conversation began to shift. People started to read the statement not just for its sentiment, but for its specific wording. And it was in the second paragraph, tucked inside a sentence describing the location of the disaster, that the trouble began. The statement referred to the region affected by the floods as the Nepal-China border. Now, on paper, that might sound accurate. Nepal does share a border with China. But here's where the geopolitical iceberg lies. The specific region devastated by the floods is most commonly and historically referred to as the Nepal-Tibet border. Tibet, a region with a distinct cultural, historical, and political identity, is currently administered by China, but its status remains one of the most delicate and sensitive topics in global diplomacy. For many observers, the choice to say China instead of Tibet was not a simple geographical clarification. It was a political statement, whether intentional or not. This is where the story takes a turn from a routine charity message to a subject of intense debate among royal watchers and international relations experts. The immediate question is why? Why would the palace use that specific phrasing? The most obvious and widely discussed answer is that it was a deliberate choice to avoid the word Tibet. This would not be an unreasonable conclusion, given the well-documented pressure that the Chinese government exerts on international institutions, corporations, and even royal households to adhere to its official nomenclature, which considers Tibet an inalienable part of China. Using the word Tibet in an official capacity can be seen as a subtle but powerful acknowledgement of its distinct identity, something Beijing has worked tirelessly to erase from international discourse. So when Kensington Palace chose China over Tibet, it wasn't just a matter of cartographical preference. It was a decision that had the effect of aligning the royal family's message with the official position of the Chinese government. This is a classic example of a phenomenon known as self-censorship, where institutions, fearing diplomatic or economic repercussions, alter their language to preemptively avoid offending a powerful nation. You might remember similar discussions around other global brands and even major film studios, all of whom have been accused of modifying their content or statements to maintain access to the vast Chinese market. The British royal family, with its extensive diplomatic ties and the British government's own complex relationship with Beijing, is not immune to these same pressures. But before we jump to conclusions, we have to consider the alternative. Could it simply have been a mistake? A careless error by an overworked communications officer who was quickly drafting a statement in response to a fast-moving news cycle? It's certainly possible. The pressure on the palace press office is immense, especially during periods of high sensitivity, like the one the family has been navigating recently. In that environment, a slip of the keyboard or a lapse of geopolitical awareness is not out of the realm of possibility. Perhaps someone simply wrote China because it's the term most often used in modern maps and news reports, without thinking about the deep-seated political implications for the people of Tibet and their supporters around the world. However, this is where the scrutiny of the royals works against the simple mistake theory. The Kensington Palace communications team is not just any press office. They are dealing with the future king and queen. Every single word that goes out under their names is subject to multiple layers of review and legal vetting. The idea that a phrase as loaded as Nepal-China border could slip through several layers of approval without anyone raising an eyebrow seems, to many observers, difficult to believe. That level of oversight is designed precisely to catch these kinds of errors. So if it wasn't caught, it raises a different question. Was it planted? Was this a deliberate top-down decision to align with China? And if so, who made that call? Was it a palace official, or was it possibly influenced by the British government, the Foreign Office, which is technically responsible for the UK's foreign policy? This ambiguity is what makes the story so compelling. It exists in the gray area between an innocent mistake and a calculated geopolitical maneuver. It transforms a simple tweet or press release into a Rorschach test where people see what they want to see. If you are critical of the Chinese government's policies, you likely see this as a shameful act of capitulation, a sign that even the royals are bending the knee to Beijing. If you are more cynical about the media, you might see it as a storm in a teacup, a nitpicking of an otherwise well-intentioned message of sympathy. The truth, as it often does, probably lies somewhere in the complex space between these two poles. But let's think about the consequences. Whether it was a mistake or a deliberate strategy, the result is the same. The conversation has shifted away from the tragedy in Nepal and onto the royals. The people who are actually suffering, the families who lost everything in the flood, have become a secondary story. The first story is now about a single word and what it signifies. This is the Streisand effect in action. By trying to avoid a controversy, the palace may have created an even bigger one. If they had simply used the term Nepal-Tibet border, it is likely that very few people would have batted an eye. It was the self-conscious avoidance of the term that set up the red flags. Now, what does this mean for Prince William and Princess Kate specifically? They are in a difficult position. Their entire brand, especially in recent years, has been built on being modern, relatable, and most importantly, authentic. They have positioned themselves as advocates for mental health, for the environment, and for vulnerable communities. This incident, however, ties them, however indirectly, to the cold, hard realities of international power politics. It undercuts their message of humanitarianism by suggesting that their outreach is filtered through a political lens. Can you truly be a compassionate advocate for people if your message of support is simultaneously being used to appease a foreign power? This is the uncomfortable question that the Nepal flood statement has left hanging in the air. The public reaction to this has been, predictably, divided. There are those who are defending the palace, arguing that China is the legally recognized governing authority of the region and that using the term is simply a matter of factual accuracy. They argue that the royal family should stay out of contentious political issues and that the statement was about a flood, not about the status of Tibet. On the other side, there are human rights advocates, Tibetan support groups, and political commentators who have expressed deep disappointment. They see the wording as a betrayal of the values of freedom and self-determination that the UK claims to champion. For them, it's a stark reminder of how far institutions will go to protect their economic and diplomatic interests. The internet, of course, has been ablaze with both sides, turning what was a minor clause in a press release into a global talking point. The controversy also highlights a broader tension within the royal family itself. William and Harry's public feud, the ongoing questions about transparency, and now this diplomatic misstep all contribute to a narrative of an institution struggling to adapt to the modern world. For William, this is particularly challenging. He is not just a celebrity prince, he is being groomed for the throne. This means he has to navigate the political neutrality required of a constitutional monarch while also leading the family's charitable and public-facing work. This incident is a masterclass in how difficult that balancing act can be. One wrong word chosen by a team that reports to him can damage his reputation and create an international incident. So, what happens next? Will Kensington Palace issue a correction or a clarification? As of now, it appears unlikely. Issuing a correction would be an admission of fault, and it would also force them to take a side, which is precisely what they were trying to avoid. If they correct it to Tibet, they will anger China. If they stand by China, they further alienate the pro-Tibet community. The safest and therefore most likely course of action is to remain silent and let the news cycle move on. This is a classic crisis communication strategy. Say nothing and hope the next big story comes along to bury this one. And in the fast-paced world of modern media, it will likely work. Within a few days, this story will be forgotten by the mainstream press. But it won't be forgotten by everyone. These are the moments that define an institution's character in the eyes of those who care deeply. Every seemingly small decision contributes to a larger story. The story here isn't just about a flood or a border dispute. It's about the constant, invisible tug-of-war between staying true to one's values and playing the game.
Of realpolitik. It's a reminder that even a message of pure sympathy can be politicized, and that in the highest echelons of power, there is no such thing as an apolitical word. The choice of a single term can reveal more about power dynamics than a year's worth of official meetings. And that is why this small detail from a royal statement is so important. It's a tiny crack in the polished facade, and through that crack, we get a glimpse of the immense pressures that shape the world's oldest and most famous monarchy. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If one word can cause this much trouble, what else is being carefully chosen, vetted, and shaped in the messages we receive every single day?